And welcome back to the Part-Time Otaku Podcast. My name is Grant.
My name is Dave.
If this is your first time listening to the show, this season we are covering My Hero Academia Season 5. Today's episode is episode 22. This is a anime-only podcast. We have no insights into the manga, so this is pretty much just what we see is what we guess, I suppose. But so I guess we'll jump into the show quickly. So we want to thank Ocean Treat for the Jiro thumbnail. Love me some neon cyberpunk vibes.
Big time. We've had a couple like cyberpunk type themed thumbnails this season. I think we had a really good one of Pinky too from Stochastic Machine.
Oh,
on
yes.
Instagram.
Yeah.
He does a whole bunch of them like that. So anyway, shout out to the great art.
Yeah.
It's crazy how much Jiro comes up in fan art. For whatever reason, she's a huge fan favorite for this kind of stuff.
Well, she's kind of like
One of the more regular looking characters.
One of the more regulars, but her character design is also, it's a little counterculture. And I find a lot of, just like the subgenre of artists and like, fan art and all that stuff is kind of like in of itself counterculture. So she kind of like fits the vibe that way.
That's very astute of you. I think that's probably it.
But great character. Like that's the thing too. Like it's funny to see when you have such a big cast like that, the ones that do stick out. And you're right, Jiro is definitely one of those. Mm-hmm. But so we'll get into the synopsis there. So as Twice tries to save Toga, he thinks back on his past and makes a realization that helps him.
Sad Man's Parade.
Sad Man's Parade.
That's the title of the episode. What do you think? Not promising.
No, I think it's a great follow-up to what we've been seeing, but there's a lot of mechanics of the episode that I think this episode, for me, I think Twice is an incredible character. I think this is a case of too much screen time.
Interesting. Too much of a good thing, perhaps?
I think too much of a good thing is an excellent way to put that. Like, it's, but it's weird because, like, at the end of the day, his quirk and his character is about kind of multiplication. And, obviously this episode, like, we'll get to, like, the brass tacks of it, but, like, there was just literally so much of him. And it was so distracting and a problem with, this might just be a sub problem, but there's just so much written text on the screen, and obviously we don't speak Japanese, so you're trying to follow everything that's going on, and there's just a lot was flying at you this episode.
Yeah, you can see what they're going for with that, like, busyness, like they're trying to create chaos on screen, and it certainly works in some instances, but you're right, when you're trying to read everything, like what's vital dialogue, what isn't, what's meant to just be noise, when you don't speak the language, a lot of that is lost. Yes. It's very tricky to keep up with.
But like I said, like good episode, but like I think the mechanic of the episode I think it succeeded in what it wanted to do, but it was a little intimidating. But again, it kind of proved itself, right? Like that's the whole point of it. But anyway, let's jump into the plot there.
Yeah, so this episode it picks up right off where last week left, and it's the Meta Liberation Army trying to kill Toga and take Twice. And then we learn about last week, like it was kind of weird how they introduced this guy's quirk, but they sort of explained it in the intro here. So this guy with like the weird bowl cut mullet thing over the eyes.
Skeptic,
Mr. Skeptic. His quirk is making puppets, and then he can control them with technology. So it's a peculiar quirk. We haven't seen him like create said puppets. All we know is that supposedly he's made them, and they're a bunch of Twice copies, not in costume, which is also why it was confusing.
I found it interesting that Redestro kind of jumped in, like, because he was kind of one explaining how Skeptic's quirk worked, and he was very quick to point out of like, yeah, with my technology, he's able to succeed or truly use his power, and it's like this guy is so fucking full of himself.
Big time. Yeah. He gets some good moments too later on.
Yes.
Right before the OP, there was what I thought was like a relatively dark opening for My Hero Academia, which is where it's the puppet. The puppets are about to snap Toga's neck, or it looks like they're trying to do that. They're in anime time, so they're moving at 1/64th speed.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, is that Toga resisting, like, subconsciously, or is that just anime time?
That's just anime time. And he's like, he's having like a full-on breakdown, and then they cut to the OP. And there's just like all this dialogue and all these close-ups of his face and all like the lines of his face and all the tears and all that. I was like, oh Jesus, this is kind of intense. And then the OP hits, and we moved into flashback portion of the episode, which is mandatory now in season 5.
But it's the good type of flashback. It's not, there's only 2 options this season. It's one or the other, and it's the good one. It's the genuine character backstory and the most effective part of the episode of how one of the best ways to show how a villain is made.
Yeah, they. I will say. I agree with you. I think it's best part of the episode. It's effective. And it always works, right? When they do these like flashbacks right before a character has like a breakthrough moment. I will say, just like playing devil's advocate, it's becoming a little on the nose and a little predictable when you like reuse the same plot mechanic every time. Like every time a character's about to have a moment, you flash back to their past, like to try and give the audience context. Like it's just, we've done it every episode for the last 10.
But so I guess, playing on that and taking that a little further is, I think normally that would be a big deal for me, but these are characters that we've not seen all season, and we've never really had the backstory for them before. It's not like we're rehashing old ground with Twice, or these other characters. So like at least it's it's an easy pill to swallow.
Yeah.
But I do agree, like they've been very very reliant on.
They might have to do it this way because we've talked about My Hero Academia's strength of being able to juggle characters, but this might be a necessary step or a necessary plot device, like using a flashback every time, because you can't possibly imagine your audiences knows every single character,
sure,
especially when they're spread so thin and they all get so little screen times. Like sometimes you just have to put the context immediately in front of the action scene, if it's not a main character or even like a top 10 character for that matter, right? Like when's the last time like we had a scene like this from Twice? Like it hasn't existed, and we're in season 5.
Yeah. This is the power of the shelf, man. It's like you say, you say all the time. It's just the power of this My Hero shelf that they can pull from at any time.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
I will say I really liked this particular flashback. Like just seeing like an origin story in like, what do you think this was, like 4 minutes?
I think so. 5? Like it was perfect. It was not rushed. Everything was pretty clear. It had moments of stuff we've seen before, which I thought was pretty effective. Like that major scene of, I think, him tied up and all his doubles are kind of killing each other in the room. Like we've seen that before a couple times, I believe. So, they had the effectiveness of stuff we've seen, and then the real early stuff of when he was, they say he was 16, but he looked exactly how he does now.
100%.
Which I thought was funny. I was like, oh, that's budget. But, like it was good. Like
it's sort of his rise to power and his fall, and then when he loses his mind.
It was sad. He's a very sympathetic character, like any good villain is.
Yep.
But that scene of him in the interrogation room with the cops, and he's like, yeah, but like I was going the speed limit. The guy pulled out in front of me. And the cop just goes, well, you're going to have a record, but like people can look themselves up. And I'm like, that's shitty, like it is really shitty.
Victim of circumstance, right? And the guy he hit just so happens to be an important client, and therefore not only does he have a record, but he also loses his job as a result. So really just sort of pushed down by society and kind of kept there. And then, of course, he runs into Jiran, makes friends, becomes, lives a life of crime. It goes bad. But then that's when he meets Jiran afterwards, after he's, like, lost his mind. They do plant a very important egg. They don't plant an egg. What am I saying? Did you know that's where eggs come from, Grant? They come out of holes in the ground. Yeah. Oh, I see your egg tree is doing well here. Jesus. I think that's a mix-up between they planted a seed and a Easter egg. That's what happened in my brain just now.
That's what we're gonna planting an egg from going forward. That's where we're going.
Anyway, so they plant this great egg, and they just say, like the clones are not all that. They're not all that powerful or sustainable.
Yeah.
They break pretty easily, especially the more of them that you have. They say that especially right up front. They're like, oh, even if you like break bones, you'll fuck them up. Because when we flash forward to the present, he immediately gets both of his arms broken.
Yeah.
It's like, okay. I was wondering why they told us this. But this leads us to like the moment. This is like Like you were saying, like the brushstroke that paints most of the episode is that Twice gets his arms broken. Then he realizes, wait a minute, I'm still here. That means I'm not a clone. I'm the original. You know what that made me think of? Invincible.
Oh. Oh, the twins.
The two twins.
Yeah.
No, I'm the original. No.
Yeah.
Because you kind of always...
And they're outwitting each other the whole time.
And they say it gets like sad at the end of that show because they're like, no, you have to think you're the original, otherwise you go crazy.
Yeah.
Pretty scary.
Yeah.
But he has that moment where he like has this realization, and that's when he gets his quirk upgrade, like most of the league has had in the last couple of episodes. And I don't know how many clones he was able to max out at before, but he makes thousands. Is that fair?
Well, I would say okay. So the thing that I couldn't get out of my head is if there's supposedly 110 or 111,000 people in this city and they're all attacking them more or less at once, when you visually see Twice and the amount of twices there are on screen, it must be double or triple that number. Would you think? Not think?
Yeah, I don't know. Like,
it's messy. This whole liberation thing is so fucking messy, and it's just one of those things that you just got to turn your brain off and just enjoy what's in front of you.
Yeah, because you don't want to be the guy that has, or you don't want to be the person that has to like root through it and try and like poke holes. But like sometimes like when there are just these gaping holes in the story and the audience gets confused, like, wait, what? That's what's happening right now, because I know that the Metal Liberation Army is 100 and something K people strong. I think they're all present in this city, because I know that 90% of this city is supposed to be sleeper agents.
Yeah.
So is it 100,000 plus people attacking? Like, because if so, where are the heroes? Like, where's the actual heroes? Like, wouldn't like the actual Alliance of Heroes realize like there's shit going on? I don't know. We're not there yet to like deal with the repercussions of this conflict, but it's just sort of like you said, it's sloppy, it's messy, it's weird.
It's very yeah.
And if you don't want us to poke holes, like don't throw the numbers around, like don't.
You just have to don't say it.
Yeah, just be intentionally vague. Say that they're outnumbered 10-1, or that the odds are like insurmountable. Don't give us like population numbers and cities and percentages of said cities. Like it's weird. You're asking for trouble, especially when you fuck it up.
It sounds so obvious to say, but less is more.
Yes.
You know, like let our imagination run wild on this stuff. You know, it's the basis of these shows, like we have and other people is just picking these things apart and getting excited. Like don't give us that. That's it's no, I 100% agree.
Yeah. So okay, so from here, this is like the Ride of the Rohirrim moment, because
basically
there's about as many of them as well. But I think it was like cool. Like he had. There was another flashback where it shows him like failing to help Tomura clone the quirk bullets and
the Yakuza bullets.
Yeah, they're just sort of explaining the limitations of his quirk
but also reminding you.
Yes.
Which it was a very effective way to get that message across.
Agreed. And then they have this animation while he duplicates that says "A March of Grief, the Sad Man's Parade."
Sad Man's Parade.
Which is pretty, because he's like he's heartbroken, right?
Yeah.
I that was like effective for me. I was like, what, that's pretty good, because they did do a decent job of setting up Twice's fixation with Toga, or his genuine compassion, whatever it is. They did a good job establishing that. So props. This is when we cut to Redestro, and now we have to like go and like, okay, what's everybody else in the episode up to? Because we spent so much time with Twice. So now it's just quick cuts. It's Redestro saying, "Oh, this is like a rare failure from you, Mr. Skeptic." And I feel like they spend more time than they need to here on Mr. Skeptic saying it's not a failure yet. So
I've only failed the one time, and this isn't a failure yet.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's interesting.
So I'm guessing there will be a reversal in the next episode or two. Like maybe Mr. Skeptic will have like something up his sleeve. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, because I wonder, because we don't see the original Twice after he originally fires off Sad Man's Parade, right? So he's technically still with Toga somewhere. So I'm wondering if
he grabs her and runs away.
He grabs her, because that's the thing too. Like they do want Twice. So I'm wondering if Mr. Skeptic kind of. This is what I had said last week too. I said I obviously like the episode started with Twice doing his thing, but we kind of had the feeling that maybe that we would open the episode to Twice just being nabbed already, and like we're focusing on the rest of the stuff. So I'm wondering if there maybe is still some elements of that potentially. But I think this Mr. Skeptic and Twice stuff is not over. I think
that's a pretty fair prediction. There's lots of funny stuff. You were talking about this at the beginning. There's lots of funny stuff happening in the background, but it's also extremely busy, right? All the Twices running everywhere. Some of them have really funny lines, but a lot of it gets like mixed up and all the confusion. Mr. Compress, I forgot his name now. His name last week, tells Twice to save a few of the Metal Liberation Army because they're still anticipating Gigantomachia to show up. So we have to remember that we did not anticipate Twice being able to take on the Metal Liberation Army like single-handedly. They had like a whole plan. So they're still anticipating that Machia is going to arrive. But then they also like even up the score a little bit because this ice guy that controls ice. Is
it Gaten?
Yeah,
Gaten or
Gaten or Jatan, I don't know. He can, like his quirk, they're also being quite liberal with it, right? Because at first, like Dobby's like, you're gonna run out of ice, and then he's like, oh no, I can use the water in the pipes and freeze it. It's like, oh, okay, so you have unlimited quirk then. Whatever.
Yeah, I don't just control ice. I can control temperature of ice, and do you know what ice is made of? It's like, okay, duh, thank you. Like,
so that's convenient. But he blows away thousands of the Twices, and it sort of like evens up the score because like it felt like the Liberation Army would just lose immediately if he didn't do that. And then the doctor at home base, the man in the chair, is like watching the situation with satellites, providing support. And he wakes up Gigantomachia with the remote using All for One's voice and sends him that way.
But he says something interesting about how they're cheating, and your master successor is doing his best to prove his or along those lines. And I'm like, there's so many. It's so weird. Like this episode, it feels like more than what we've seen recently. There's just so much little breadcrumbs they're dropping, and it's like, oh, what are you doing there? It's like there's only 2 episodes left. I believe
2 or 3, yeah.
And it's just like this is a lot of shit they're dropping, all like little hints all over the place. It's.
I agree with you. It's like you better do something with these clues, or you better do something with these loose things you're leaving behind. Like it better matter, right? I can't remember. There's that fucking term. God, I don't want to spend time thinking of it. But there's this thing in just screenwriting, right? Where like if you put a gun on the wall of a cabin, like it better be there for a reason, or generally speaking, it is there for a reason.
Sure.
Unless it's like a blatant misdirect. That's not what this is. But the show alludes to a lot of shit all the time, right?
Especially with the villains.
Especially with the villains, a lot of these characters, over time, they move from one-dimensional to 2 or 3-dimensional characters, but it literally takes years, and that's not an exaggeration, right? We've seen Twice for 2 or 3 years now, and now we get this moment. So, like, but it is unfair, or I think it's just tough on the audience, and it's tough on the story and on the character, if, like, you drop this hint and you don't use it for a season or 2. It's like, well, that's not going to be effective, because, like, you have to go through like the merry-go-round of other characters before this character gets another shot. You know what I mean? It's tricky. It's like the strength of the show is also sometimes simultaneously its weakness.
100%. And the thing too with this episode, like I'm saying it again, like it's such a noisy episode. Why would something like that be said if it didn't have some significant meaning or even a slight meaning going forward? So it's, I don't know. It's.
And, this stuff, what we've said it before, this is my favorite shit, right? The All-for-One, the Tomura Shigaraki plot, the All Might plot, these characters are bound with one another in a way that we know the show is headed there in the conclusion, right? Give me some of that shit. Don't throw away these weird lines like every 10 episodes to string us along. Okay. So anyway, Gigantomachia does wake up and he starts marching towards the conflict, so he'll probably arrive within the next episode.
The way he blasts off was so fucking dope. I was kind of like, oh, shit. To see a move like that?
That was sick animation. Gecko The guy that looks like a gecko. I think they
Yeah.
should call him Gecko. And Tomura, they approach the tower, but they're surrounded yet again. But then more Twice copies arrive to help them, and they have like this really fun moment. I was kind of confused about this because Twice is like freaking out about Jiran being still held hostage at the top of the tower. And then I don't know if this is a foreshadowing line or a weak line, but Tomura goes, "Playing with people's hearts, I'll never be able to forgive you, Liberation Army." I don't know if this is like meant to say like Tomura now is enraged on behalf of his comrade, like because he sees that like Twice is visibly distraught, or is like, does this touch a nerve for Tomura, or is this?
I wonder.
Like, what do you think?
So, this is only kind of basing off what we've seen the past couple episodes, because obviously, like, Shigaraki's kind of been like big bad 0.5, like he was like, he's clearly behind, All for One, but, so with the hallucination stuff last episode and kind of him slowly piecing together maybe what his past is like, it's just maybe he's kind of the bigger picture starting to come to him a little more. Also, too, they really, in these past few episodes, they show how dedicated the League of Villains is to Shigaraki. More than just like they are loyal, they love Shigaraki, for the lack of a better term. And I'm almost wondering if he is aware of that, and like they are so loyal to him, he supports them back. Yeah. So
maybe
it's
there's a real bond there. Like a lot of the characters are getting on the hero side, right? Like when you consider the things that Midoriya has been through with Shoto and Bakugo and Lida, like all the stain stuff, all the times they've been, like those characters are probably pretty close. Maybe they're trying to illustrate that the villains also have a pretty special bond. Mm-hmm. I think that might be fair.
Yeah.
Some politician arrives. He gives a speech that spurs on the Meta Liberation Army, and then I think one of the guys even notices.
Gecko,
Gecko notices. Oh, every time he talks, he really amps everybody up. Do you think that's like a poke at like politicians like really know how to get a crowd going, or do you think like his quirk?
I think that's his quirk, and you see that a lot in this show where people kind of play into a role similar to their quirk.
Okay.
I think this is because this is at the end of the episode. This is exactly what they did last week with setting up Dabi and Getten, and then also like Twice. I think towards the end of the episode, setting up Twice in the Toga stuff for this episode. I think they had Gecko point out this dude, and then
because he's going to be next episode's fight.
Because it's him and Mr. If they're all getting upgrades, if they're all going to take the time to show upgrades, all that's left is Mr. Compress and Gecko.
Oh, good point.
So maybe that's just like a quick little tee up there, but clearly, because that was one of when they first get to Daika City, this is the guy that kind of meets them, along with I'm already blanking on her name. She's dead now. Curious,
the reporter chick.
Curious,
yeah, and she actually had a similar thing, right, where her quirk name was Curious, and she was like a reporter.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
Very meta.
Very meta. So one of the Twice copies makes it through all of this stuff. Tomura and Co are still like engaged in combat, but one of the Twice copies makes it to the Twice of the Tower, and he confronts Reed Destro. He does what we forgot he can do, and he makes copies of not only himself, but he also makes copies of the rest of the League of Villains. So he makes a copy of Tomura, Compress, Dabi. So all of that is happening. Wait, I'm just realizing, did we skip over, or did I miss the Dabi moment? Because there was a cool thing
with him and Getten.
Yeah. Yes, I did. Okay, so I just want to mention this really briefly. Because they kind of hinted at something with Getten and Dabi in that fight when Getten blew away all the Twice copies. He was saying that like Dabi was having trouble keeping up, or that his body was reaching his limit, and you can kind of see pieces of him like smoking.
Yeah.
I think that's very interesting. I've always wondered why Dabi looks like that, and I don't think the show has given us a backstory or a full-on Dabi episode yet, right?
Also, we haven't got the Dabi power upgrade either. Maybe that might be the next one.
Yeah.
Because him and Gettner is clearly still throwing down in the distance.
Yeah, you're right. So maybe he needs like a Super Saiyan Blue upgrade. But like, all the piercings and like the dead skin on his face and arms. I think
he looks patchworked.
Yeah, I just thought I don't know what I thought, but do you think that's a result of him burning his own body with his flames?
So,
And the flesh is becoming like desecrated?
what I thought back to is when they first meet the doctor, and the doctor just kind of casually, like, you know how I had noticed he made that comment about, like, I'm meeting some of you for the first time, some of you I haven't. Mm-hmm. And he seems that, like, him and Dobby kind of knew each other a little bit. I'm wondering if maybe Dobby is an experiment of, like, he's maybe not a Nomu, but maybe he was, like, early days. Like, this doctor clearly had his hands in a lot of cookie jars, like, typically these characters do.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. They're...
Give me a whole Dobby flashback episode.
Fuck, give me 23 minutes. Like, nonstop. Skip the OP. Just give it. That would be some serious juice.
Do 15 straight minutes of flashback and origin before you give me his power up and let him blow away this Jatan guy. I'd be fine with that. Okay, so yeah, I'm glad I mentioned that. So we're at the top of the tower, and a Twice copy makes copies of the rest of the League. And this is the first time I think we see Redestro's quirk, which apparently is just a giant arm, but also it discolors his body the more he uses it.
Well, because it kind of starts off when he takes that first swipe, it's just like his finger.
He decapitates one of the Twice copies, yeah.
And his like finger's kind of like black and smoking, and I'm like,
hey,
like what's going on?
That's not a quirk.
Yeah,
that's a bloody finger.
Yeah, is that a laser gun? Like. but yeah, no. Then it evolves to clearly him like jacking up his one arm, and I was like,
it seems like he might be able to make the rest of his body big too. Like maybe I don't know, like Destro, destroy, redestroy. I don't know, like maybe he just I don't know. But he goes on, and I gotta say, like sometimes you can just glaze over, and this is an anime-ism. One of the things we've noticed, I think, over time, is that like sometimes, to draw out fight scenes or to draw out climactic moments, they'll have characters monologue while they fight.
Dave, we 100% glazed over this whole scene right up until like where it ended.
What happened? What do you mean?
Just all of this. This is all the talk, like exactly what you're saying. The monologuing in the scene is where it 100% was too noisy. It dragged. It was all over the fucking place until it gets to like the actual fighting, the last like 30, 40 seconds of the episode. We were just kind of like, oh my god, like this is too much. But so, yeah, exactly to what you're saying.
They might spend 3 minutes here of him just saying stuff, but like don't get me wrong, like you and I, and I think a lot of people that watch anime pay a lot of attention to dialogue, because a lot of the time like there's some good gems in there.
Yeah.
But this wasn't that. This was like fluffy, I'm a villain, here are my motivations and also my backstory. It's like he's just sort of monologuing while he takes swipes. It was It was a really, really weird and really weak moment in the episode. But I don't want to rag on it too much. I did think of one thing. There is a neat little sequence where the camera's like panning in landscape mode, like from the floor, and it's Redestro just swinging over and over again at a Tomura clone. It's a clone. I forgot about that for a sec at the time. But he's dodging really effectively, and I was like, I wonder if that's because he's been fighting Gigantomachia for like a month and a half. Mm-hmm. Like, do you think he's become more adept at just evading? But he eventually does get caught. I think the ending is like the business, of this whole sequence. Redestro did have one cool line at the end, but it was really undercut by the rest of how shitty his monologue was.
Yeah.
But he just says, do you really think some random thugs in an urge to destroy carry more weight than we do? Mm-hmm. I thought that was cool. Because, they're filled with glorious purpose.
So the best part of that is the follow-up to that scene is when, we'll come back to this moment, but, when it cuts to, the Shigaraki clone has a moment to tell Twice to, you better pad up the landing.
Yep.
I made eye contact with the other guy. It cuts to a flashback. Yeah, at that moment I was holding on. I locked eyes with this guy.
Yeah.
And I was like, whatever. Like, this is silly, but like, we're almost done here. Like, who cares? But when the tower comes down and it cuts back to Redestro before, Shigaraki's kind of his gnarly line at the end, Redestro says, oh, I didn't get to hear what he said. I really wanted to hear what he said. Because he says that line, has Shigaraki pinned, and then all this, the tower crumbles and all that, like the big part of the episode. Mm-hmm. but just him knowing like he wanted, it wasn't a rhetorical question, like he wanted that answer. So it's I'm excited for they're clearly going to throw down shortly.
Yeah, I loved the animation and just like the reminder, like, oh right, Shigaraki doesn't just like dust people. Like the man could bring down an entire fucking building.
Yeah.
In just by touching it, because it was a good reminder about how his quirk. I have one technical question because Shigaraki also got a power up last episode. Have we caught up to present day where Shigaraki was being shocked by the doctor? Or is that gonna happen?
I believe that's going to happen.
Okay. I was just wondering, like, the power up and, like, he's, like, getting sick and, like, he's got a lot going on mentally. I was just wondering, is any of that the result of these experiments or whatever the doctor does to him? Or is that just how he is as of late? But I think it's just how he is right now. Because he's having a rough go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sleepy.
I think that pretty much does it for this episode.
Yeah. That's the thing, like, with all the noise, and I think that was purposely designed that way, it's a pretty good episode. It's very in line with what we've been seeing this whole Villain Academia arc, which is
the best of the season so far.
By far, yeah.
Big killer. Okay, I think we can wrap it up here. Thank you guys so much for listening. Definitely check out the post show, which usually drops a day or two after My Hero podcast. We talk about everything else that we're watching. I'm trying to watch like a movie a week. We're watching a ton of other anime. Tokyo Revengers, we just wrapped up To Your Eternity. Sunny Boy we're also watching. So lots and lots of stuff on the post show. So definitely check that out and support the podcast on whatever social media platform you like. And we will see you next week.
Bye, guys.
Cheers.